Adults and children in families make up about 30% of the homeless population. On a single night in January of 2024, an estimated 259,473 people in families were identified as homeless. Approximately 18,557 people in families were living on the street, in a car, or in another place not meant for human habitation. In 2022, an estimated 453,016 people in 141,609 family households used an emergency shelter or a transitional housing program. Families experiencing homelessness are like other families that are also poor but who have a home to live in. Both may struggle with incomes that are far less than they need to pay for housing. In fact, it is often some jolt to this precarious situation, a lost job or work hours, conflict with family members they are staying with, an unanticipated bill, or violence within the home that leads families to seek help from homeless service programs. Homeless families are usually headed by a single woman with limited education, are typically young, and have young children. Homelessness can have a tremendous impact on children, their education, health, sense of safety, and overall development. Fortunately, researchers find that children are also highly resilient. The spectrum of youth homelessness is vast. It includes young children sleeping with their mothers in crowded shelters and families living in tent encampments in public parks. There are teenage runaways who have fled abusive homes to live on the streets, and kids who spend their nights hiding in cars or in abandoned buildings. But youth homelessness also takes less recognizable forms. Couch surfing teens and children whose families have been forced to double up with relatives and friends, and who might go undetected by authorities. And even if the authorities do know about them, they may not consider them to be homeless. There is no single uniform definition of homelessness across states or even within the federal government. That greatly complicates efforts to help the young people experiencing it, especially when cities, states, and nonprofits are using federal dollars to do so. Several states tried to clarify the situation and to provide more aid to homeless youth, especially to teenagers fending for themselves. Couch surfing is a form of homelessness where individuals stay for short periods of time with friends, family, or even strangers because they have nowhere else to live. It is characterized by moving from shelter to shelter without a fixed address. Although it may not fit the stereotype of homelessness, it's a common situation, especially among young people. People are homeless if they lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence or reside in an emergency shelter or place not meant for human habitation, according to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. The agency's definition also includes people who will imminently lose their primary nighttime residence and those fleeing domestic violence. But the U.S. Department of Education's more expansive definition also includes people who are doubling up or living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or camping grounds because they can't afford other accommodations. The dueling definitions also leads to a wide range of estimates on how many young people are experiencing homelessness, making it practically impossible to know the numbers for certain. For example, HUD estimated that on a single night in 2022, there were 50,767 families with children experiencing homelessness. There were another 30,090 unaccompanied homeless youth in the United States, with an additional 6,348 youth experiencing homelessness as parents. But statistics compiled by the U.S. Department of Education suggest there were about 115,000 unaccompanied youth just among the nearly 1.3 million public school students who experienced homelessness in 2019 and 2020. In some counties in Florida, where I had access to information and worked with the Homeless Coalition. Specifically, the counties I'm going to refer to are Volusia and Brevard. The student and transition advocates in those schools used the more inflated numbers of unaccompanied youth, whether they were at risk of homeless or simply staying at a friend or relative's home. By doing so, they could secure more increased public funding, thereby exploiting community resources. Homeless children should be defined by the HUD definition, with an understanding that some of those couch surfing children are truly at risk of homelessness while others are not. When compared to low-income and homeless families, children experiencing homelessness have been shown to have higher levels of emotional and behavioral problems, have increased risk of serious health problems, are more likely to experience separation from their families, and experience more school mobility, repeat a grade, be expelled or drop out of school, and have lower academic performance. Homelessness results from the combined efforts of extreme poverty, lack of affordable housing, decreased government support, the challenge of raising children alone, domestic violence, and fractured social support. The experience of homelessness results in a loss of community, routine, possessions, privacy, and security. Children, mothers, and families who live in shelters need to make significant adjustments to shelter living and are confronted by problems such as the need to reestablish a home, interpersonal difficulties, mental and physical problems, and child-related difficulties such as illness. Homelessness also makes families more vulnerable to other forms of trauma such as physical and sexual assault, witnessing violence, or abrupt separation. The stress related to these risks comes in addition to the stress resulting from homelessness itself and can impede recovery due to ongoing traumatic reminders and challenges. The experience of homelessness puts families in situations where they're at a far greater risk of additional traumatic experiences such as assault, witnessing violence, or abrupt separation. Children, parents, and families are stressed not only by the nature of shelter living and the need to reestablish a home, but by interpersonal difficulties, mental and physical problems, and child-related difficulties such as illness. The stresses associated with homelessness can exacerbate other trauma-related difficulties and interfere with recovery due to ongoing traumatic reminders and challenges. Children bear the brunt of homelessness. Homeless children are sick at twice the rate of other children. They suffer twice as many ear infections, have 4 times the rate of asthma, and have 5 times more diarrhea and stomach problems. Homeless children go hungry twice as often as children who are not homeless. More than 1/5 of homeless preschoolers have emotional problems serious enough to require professional care, but less than 1/3 receive any treatment. Homeless children are twice as likely to repeat a grade compared to children who are not homeless. Homeless children have twice the rate of learning disabilities and 3 times the rate of emotional and behavioral problems of children who are not homeless. Half of homeless school-age children experience anxiety, depression, or withdrawal compared to 18% of children who are not homeless. By the time homeless children are 8 years old, 1 in 3 has a major mental disorder. These are not only challenges in themselves, but may act as secondary adversities, putting a child at greater risk for trauma reactions and making recovery difficult. Housing is the solution to homelessness for low-income families. Most families would benefit from assistance to help them rapidly reconnect to permanent housing. Rapid rehousing provides help with housing search, financial assistance, and case management services to help families quickly transition out of shelter and back into their own housing. A small subset of families may require more intensive or long-term support through the provision of transitional housing, permanent rental assistance, or permanent supportive housing to escape homelessness. Families can also benefit from connection to other supports designed to strengthen and improve their lives, such as childcare, employment assistance, early childhood services, income support, or mental health counseling. Programs like Crosswinds Youth Services in Brevard County, Florida, can be important partners in ensuring that families are not traumatized again following entry into shelters. Staff members, including case managers, children's workers, security staff, and maintenance personnel, and program administrators, understand, anticipate, and respond to the special needs of trauma survivors and must ensure that their services do not inadvertently re-traumatize the families. The initial step in dealing with families exposed to trauma is for providers to become trauma-informed. Staff must be trained to recognize the basics of trauma reactivity in mothers and children of different ages to respond appropriately to a family's needs and behaviors. In addition to being prepared to address specific trauma symptoms, and effective staff would create safe, supportive, non-threatening environments by maximizing choice and control for participants, avoiding provocation and power assertion, modeling pro-social behavior and skills, maintaining clear and consistent boundaries, sharing power in the running of shelter activities, and delivering services in a non-judgmental and respectful manner. By making families co-participants in establishing rules and regulations and by housing caregivers and children together, programs can help prevent traumatization. Programs can also empower families by maximizing their choice and control, thereby ensuring that they constructively use services to attain personal stability and heal emotional hurt. In addition to being trauma-informed, programs must provide trauma-specific services to promote healing from those traumatic experiences. Trauma-specific services include support groups focused on the dynamics of trauma and its impact on family members' emotional and physical health, parenting and coping, and a range of culturally appropriate services that respond to the varying manifestations of trauma. Community-based shelters are the primary refuge for hundreds of thousands of homeless families in the United States. These shelters and other community mental health agencies can be important locations for the delivery of trauma-specific care to homeless families. Trauma-specific care can help improve the outcomes of these vulnerable families by ensuring safety, minimizing risk, and providing positive support. Trauma-specific care may include supporting caregivers' roles in restoring a sense of stability to the family, screening caregivers for histories of trauma, assessing whether a child's development is progressively appropriate or has been interrupted by trauma, screening for children's history of traumatic experiences, create administrative infrastructure to support training that will assist staff in understanding and addressing trauma, training shelter staff and community health personnel to understand the link between traumatic experiences and adverse health and mental health outcomes, constructing linkages between shelters and community-based trauma services where families can be helped on their road to recovery. Shelters must identify and collaborate with programs that are sensitive to and have expertise in dealing with the needs of homeless children and families. And finally, by promoting wider awareness of the role in trauma in precipitating and extending family homelessness. Youth shelters can play an important role in helping advocates, providers, researchers, clergy, and community volunteers understand that severe trauma often precedes and characterizes the experience of homeless families. In this way, youth shelters can strengthen their own capacity to serve homeless families, hastening their return to community life. Thank you.